everybody. I have the super duper bonus for you that is the most extraordinary, the most accomplished human being I know on this planet. And I am so proud and honored to have him again on a summit. And of course, this is the Happy Body, Happy Planet #2 summit, 21 plus incredible, crazy honest conversations on health, purpose, and how to save the world now, or how to change the world now is actually the title, but in so many ways it's save as well. So this incredibly accomplished human being is a filmmaker, is an author, is a speaker, is a journalist, and that's what we're focusing on, is a nutritionist, is a healer, has won hundreds of awards in all of those categories, and he is Dr. Gary Null. So honored to have you. Welcome to Happy Body, Happy Planet 2.
Thank you. I appreciate the opportunity.
So we're going to start with, because I'm asking all my speakers this year, where in your childhood, in your youth, did you first come across questioning what's behind what you're told the story is, whether it's in the food arena? You had told me that story once, but what comes to mind when you first said, well, what the adults are telling me is not exactly what it is. Let me look what it actually is.
My mother was the secretary at the First Christian Church, Baptist Church in Parkersburg, West Virginia. And she helped the preacher, very nice man. And we all liked him, all of us who were young, because he'd play football with us. He's very athletic, he'd box. And he'd say, now don't hold your punches because I'm your minister. And that was such a difference in the communication and the association, especially when I was young. And I would hear my mother make up lists of people, the parishioners, who were having trouble. Maybe they were unable to pay their mortgage. Possibly something was happening. They didn't have the income to even buy adequate food. So my mother would give me a list. And on that list, it would be to go to the baker and to get X number of products, breads, rolls. And that would be for this person. Then I'd go over to the meat store, which is right across the street from our little house. And I'd go in and I'd just hand him a list. He'd look at the list. He'd say, okay. And he would make up an order of meat with a chicken. And I would do this for all kinds of food. And then I would be with my mom when she delivered them. And it was all very quiet, very discreet. If someone needed something done, let's say there was plumbing issues, then she would call one of the parishioners and said, would you please go to this person's house and fix their plumbing? Now, it was never stated, but it was implied that these are your congregants. Don't charge them. And no one ever charged anything, ever.
That's beautiful.
Fix a car. So I began to see that society worked on many levels. And one was discretion. That if you're working in an environment, living in an environment, sharing common values, morality, ethics, character, that you want to make sure that everyone is aware of this. And I remember when I was 10 years old, and my mom said, let's walk to the block. Now, these are your typical blocks, right? Leaves everywhere in the fall that are raked up and burned, and the smelling of that fall leaf burning, the cleaning off everyone's sidewalk when it snows. Well, we walked in the block, and these are just normal middle-class working people's homes. And she said, what did you notice? So I said, I didn't. She said, okay, let's walk back. My very next door neighbor, Mrs. Kidd, she was older, she was a retired school teacher. And where I grew up, school teachers didn't have to retire, and frequently didn't. They worked until they died. And she said, you see, her grass is growing. and she's probably sick. So you make sure you go over there and you cut her grass. I said, okay. And she said, remember, later in life, you will appreciate that if you have to ask someone to do something, you're asking the wrong person. Everyone should be conscious of the environment that you live in, conscious of other people's needs. And so I understood that. And so then I looked around, and the next 2 blocks over, because everyone knew everyone. And sure enough, there were 2 of their houses, sick people, couldn't be out mowing, so I mowed them. This is how we grew up. Now, my mother made a statement to me early in life. I was about 16 years old. And it was this: if you look at the people in Parkersburg, these are people who just try to be normal. I don't want you to be normal. I want you to be exceptional.
Ah, that's amazing.
And she said, and I said, why? I mean, she said, because normal means you reach a plateau and you grow no further. Everything is simply a ritual, a repetition of that ritual every day. So you know what television shows they're going to watch, what foods they're going to eat, on which days, what movies they're going to see, where they'll travel. And that's not being exceptional. Also, these are kind and thoughtful people. They're good souls. But they're not good at confronting political problems because they trust their leaders. They won't challenge whoever they see on television, like Walter Cronkite, Huntley and Brinkley. Whatever was being said, they trusted, they believed. So if in West Virginia, if someone was believing in Joseph McCarthy in his red baiting, then they would start to look for anyone who was not obviously patriotically American. That leads to prejudice and biases. My best friend was Tony Bartlett, African American, the only one living outside of Clay Street, which was the traditional segregated street. And even though we didn't have segregation at the time in Parkersburg, it was interesting that one of the football players, a friend of mine also, who would win the game for us, he would never go to the celebration party afterwards because those parties were held in, well, there was a dentist, his daughter was like a social magnet, and she would hold parties, just, teenage parties. And I asked, why aren't you going? He said, because they'll accept me on the football field, but they don't want me in their houses. That was the understated and non-representative racism that occurred. But if you ask anyone in my hometown, are you against people of color? Oh, no, no, no. And they'd give examples. But then I say, well, then why don't your children invite them to the party? So I refused to go to any more parties. I never went to another party in my hometown after that. And people asked me why. And I told them. And Tony and I used to get beaten up all the time when we were kids because there were some people in our neighborhood who were racist. And then one day I came home, and there were 2 incidents when I came home. And this is answering your question, but in a roundabout way, giving a little more humanistic answer to it.
Yeah.
Because what happens in life that we become aware of is what we're allowed to become aware of.
Yeah.
What insights we're allowed to know, what questions we're allowed to ask, what truths we're allowed to embrace. And in any case, the first episode was I came home, and my mom said, Gary Michael, I see you have a baseball mitt. I said, yeah. She said, where was it? Oh, I found it in the alley. She said, okay, now ask yourself a question. Do you imagine someone just left it there, maybe forgot it? I said, probably. She said, well, it belongs to them. Did you first try to see who it belongs to? No. Well, isn't that a moral obligation? I said, yes. She said, never take advantage of someone's loss. In our entire society today is based upon profiting off people's loss.
Yes. That's so beautiful. Never take advantage of anyone's loss.
So as a result, as a person that appreciates the idea of competition against myself, and as I've won over 400 races, Athlete of the Year here in Florida, in my field, and in New York at the top athletic organization, the Metropolitan Athletic Congress, nominated 14 years and won 3 years, Master Track and Field Athlete of the Year. You're talking about tens of thousands of competitors. But every single one of those people I competed against, I considered allies in that athletic effort. I was competing against myself.
That is so beautiful, Gary. And I want to again highlight that again, I totally omitted that you're also a world-class winning marathon runner. So there's so much.
Yeah, I won a gold in the Jamaica Marathon and brought back a gold in the Los Angeles Marathon. I've done, I'm guessing, about 84 marathons, and some just for fun, some for competition. And it's always an experience. It challenges you, but I'm always going against myself to say, can I do better? And even on the track, when I finish a race, I'll stand there and cheer on everyone else. I celebrate them. In fact, so much so that I don't even go to the award ceremony, because it's not the awards that was important to me. It was the ability to be with other people. And if you go out in some of the marathons, we'd all go out in a pack together. We'd be talking, socializing the whole way. You know, if someone didn't get water, I'd get an extra water for them. Now, these are people we were all running in, you know, to see who would do best at the end, but we waited to the end. And whenever someone said, I'm going to go for it, we said, go for it. You know, we'd encourage them, go for it. So it wasn't as if someone defeated us. We were challenged. Where can we learn a lesson to be stronger, more viable? And then it gets into a whole different topic about getting into the zone. That's pure consciousness. When you're aware of every single thing you're doing, you're breathing, you're relaxing your muscles, and you're telling your muscles what they can do. Give you an example. 1993, my buddy, Franco Pantoni, one of the greatest race walkers in American history, we were doing the 40K, that's 24.8 miles, it's almost a marathon, on a very hilly course, on a very hot day in New Jersey. In fact, it was so hot they weren't going to do the race, but we all signed a release that we wouldn't hold them liable. We injured ourselves with heat stroke. In any case, we were seated 56 and 57, meaning of all the times we've done, we were right where we were going to finish. I'd finished 56, Franco finished 57. Now, at the end of 6 miles, coming right up to 100 yards, 6 miles, 10K, 1/4 through the race, I turned to Franco and I said, Franco, today I have to teach myself a lesson. What? What lesson? I'm going to show that all this complaining you've been doing, there's a complainer about it's so hot and so sweaty and everyone's sweat was throwing back on us, we're in front of us, that I'm not going to feel anything except telling my muscles that I'm unleashing them. What do you mean? What are you talking about?
Yeah.
I said, and so I let go when we passed. And guess what? When they were calling off our places, 56 and 57. So I let it rip. And in fact, some of the judges and other athletes say, you're quitting? Because generally when you're finishing something, you go as fast as you can. And it's the final push. And so I began to sprint, full out sprint, what you would normally do in the last 100 yards. And that's where if you're watching a track meet and someone's at the back or someone's fallen down and they're trying to get back up, and you generally see them put everything they can in the last lap and see if they catch the groove. In any case, I was sprinting with 18 miles to go and I kept it alive. All I can remember was coming up to a group and I heard someone say, didn't we lap him? Didn't we lap him? And someone says, I don't remember lapping him. And so I went right around them. There were like 15 of them in a pack. these were the top people, including the national team members and Olympians. I just went by them like they were standing still. And then I heard someone says, better catch me. And then the next thing I know, I felt the tape, or the thing I broke. It was the first time in American history that a master athlete over 40 won in the open division, meaning the young guys, 18, 19, 20-year-olds, and set a record. And it was interesting because not a single person came over and asked me what I did. Not a single person.
Yeah, it's
being. And that reminds me of something Fritz Perl, the father of Gestalt, said. A fear of knowing is a fear of doing. It's like when I go home to my family reunions, or not my family reunions, but the high school reunions. I've never once been asked about anything in my career. Not once. Or my 15 careers, because I've mastered 15.
Because you're just so intimidating. You're just so incredibly accomplished that nobody comes close.
No. It's not about intimidation. It's about if you don't want to know what you then would be responsible for, because it's like seeing something you can't unsee, hearing something you cannot unhear.
Yes.
Doing something you cannot deny that you did something. It then challenges the conditioned mind, the epigenetic conditioned mind, going back 7 generations, with our conscious mind, what we live with each day. And it's in that conscious mind that we understand humility. And once again, go back. I found the person who forgot their mitt, baseball club, and I gave it back to him. But then we came back this is a year later, and Tony and I were coming back up an alley, and a bunch of guys stopped and started using racial epithets, and we had a choice. We could go on as long as we said we would never come up that alley again. And I said, no, this is my friend, and they just beat the hell out of us. I mean, we're kids, and they're full-grown adults. You know, I must have weighed 50 pounds. Tony didn't weigh much more, and these guys were 200-pound, really tough guys. So went back. It happened many times. I went to eat dinner. Mom said, well, so what challenge did you have today? And I said, well, some people down the road here didn't want us coming. And she said, did you have a choice? I said, yeah, we had a choice. And was the choice about not going down the alley again? Yeah, that was the choice. She said, well, you chose the tough path, but the right path. And remember this in life. Anytime you're faced with a force greater than you could comprehend, don't allow fear to be what limits you in how you address it. Because fear always looks for an exit. Fear constricts, love expands. And she said, so look at those, your Boy Scout, your Life Scout, you're going towards your Eagle Scout. Look at these as merit badges, because you put your friendship at a greater level than the fear of punishment. So that's taught me lessons my whole life. And then one day, I had just done a walk. There were 3 of us, Roy McKay's, Donald Zach, and I. We decided to do a 100-mile walk to celebrate the 100th year of West Virginia's sovereignty from Virginia. And this was 1963. We were in high school. We didn't know a thing we were doing. We did everything wrong. Wrong shoes, wrong food, everything. No one had done it before. And it was supposed to be up to Moundsville, West Virginia, and then turn around and come back. We couldn't stop. Well, no one counted how much the miles were between, your inner city limits and your exit limits. We didn't count all those miles in between. So we did about 117 miles. But no one had ever done that before. President of the United States, the White House, sent us a letter. And this all over the radio, well, the walkers are here and the walkers are there. And we had this one woman, she kept saying, you don't have to walk, get in the car and I'll drive you another 20 miles. I said, no, go away. And she wouldn't go away. Anyhow, and it began to rain. It was in March. It was cold. We weren't prepared for that. It was like out of one of those movies in the desert where you start throwing gear out, because you can't carry it. We were throwing oranges out, and because someone said, take 20 oranges, and we just took 20 oranges. That was stupid. Anyhow, when we got to the town, the mayor was standing out there in the rain, handed us a key, a wooden key. We handed him a key, and immediately he started right back. No conversations, no food, nothing. So we got back, and it was a wonderful experience, and it was a terrifying experience, because then you're thinking on your way back, you hit the wall. You have no energy. You have no glucose function, no glycogen function. Your muscles are tight. You're sore. You've been out there all day, all night. Now you're into the next day, nonstop. And if you don't think that's an ultra test, it is. Anyhow, then coming into where the sign says Parkersburg Airport, about 8 miles from Parkersburg. We came up with this little rising, and here are cars on both sides of the road. 8 miles of cars. So there is my doc, Doc Lemscombe. He comes over. I read their accounts later. It was just a laugh. As he inspects the feet to show that the walkers are still healthy, I had 22 blisters. I couldn't move, but he wanted to put, pointing. I saw the photograph pointed at this, and so we just hobbled on in, and then it was just interesting. Because then my mother said, how do you feel? I said, well, sore, but I feel good. She said, well, you achieved something. She says, just remember all that you went through. Now imagine if you used the knowledge beforehand to train for anything else you do in life. What do you need? Tools. Which tools do you need? Knowledge. So you did this without tools and knowledge. And she says, now whatever you do, do it differently. Take a step up. And then she took me out to Mount Carmichael Cemetery. And she showed me Mausoleum. She said, that was a person who was one of the most important, wealthy people in Parkersburg's history. And he said, what do you think people remember about him? I said, I don't know. I don't know who he was. And how about nothing? Because he chose not to share what he had. So learn the lesson. Whatever gift you're given in life or you earn, share it. The only value of a gift is that you can give it to someone with greater need than yourself. Every gift is to be shared. And as a result of that, I've never charged the tens upon tens of thousands of people I've counseled, whether they were billionaires, which they have been, or members of the royal family, which they have been, or Hollywood celebrities, thousands of them. I've never charged a person a penny. I can blame that on my mom. So these lessons that I learned early in life showed me the levels upon which awareness occurs. And if we all stay at just the level where there's the least resistance, the least effort, the least scholarship, the least exercising of our spiritual and mental energy, then we live a very superficial and normal life. But if we want to live an exceptional life, first we surrender the ego. Then we realize that life is a joint effort, a cooperative effort. Therefore, pay attention to other people as sentient spiritual beings. Do not look at yourself as unique or exclusive. That led to when I had my farm, my first farm, Fertile Farm upstate New York, where we taught the first organic farming classes, agricultural husbandry in New York, and started the first food co-op in the United States, the High Falls Food Co-op. And when I was up there, it was a lot of work because it was an old farm, and old farms require a lot of effort and input. But thousands upon thousands of people came there, and they learned how to grow foods, how to make tofu, all these different simple choices about how to make your life better in quality, but you have to get out of your comfort zone. And then one day, I realized, I told my brothers, Howard and Steve, I said, we're not going to have a whole lot of room. And think of some of the people coming who it's a real challenge for them, even to pay the money on a Greyhound bus or whatever bus line came up there. So we made our beds in the barn, above the barn. we had a loft, and we built some futon mattress holders. That's where we slept the entire 14 years I had it. Never slept in the house. And that was always my philosophy. Let the homeless person, let those who are challenged have the bed with the bamboo stuffings and the silk organic sheets, etc. So that develops a sense of humility, because what my mother's message was be humble, so your ego doesn't see that you need more for happiness or more for success, but rather the humility by which you live allows you to share what you have without a thought that somehow you're giving something away that's of value to you.
Yeah, at the same time, you were also teaching, I mean, by example, by allowing those who hadn't had the experience of a beautiful bed to have that, and by those who needed to get some outdoor rustic, I mean, all these silly words that we have for that, for some nature exposure, to have that, who were too luxury coded in a way. But how can we get from here to, I really want to get into the nitty gritty of your investigative journalism, which so few people know about. And I saw these amazing articles that can still be found online that you wrote early in the days of exploring what the medical establishment is doing. And I also wanted to ask you, why didn't you choose to do medicine, but then chose to do nutrition instead? And then did that lead to investigating what's going on with our medical system?
All right, I'll address those. I began as an activist when I was still in high school. And after high school, after college, I was still protesting the war in Vietnam. The corruption was so obvious. The wrongheadedness supporting the military-industrial complex was self-evident. And I began to live by a principle that I created known as, what is self-evident in your problem? And therefore, what is self-evident for the solution? It's based on Occam's razor. Occam, the mystic philosopher, who said, use the razor to cut through the fat to get to the meat. And this metaphor is to cut through all the obfuscation, all the complexities of the problem to get to the simplicity of the solution. So I see it hundreds of times a day, how simple solutions are and how complex we make them. So I began to investigate. I wrote some of the first articles against the pharmaceutical industry and against big agriculture. I was supporting Rachel Carson in her Silent Spring.
Yes.
Upon her shoulders, the entire environmental movement stood. And so I was out there demonstrating. Sometimes it'd be 2 or 3 of us demonstrating, and we were not appreciated. I can tell you that from the comments people would make. But then that led to me looking at organic versus pesticide produce, industrialized farming versus organic sustainable. And all the science was on the side of organic, sustainable, localized farming. And I wrote a book about organic farming and farming in your own backyard, as simple as growing things on your counter like sprouts. And then I took on the corruption of the polluting industries. And
how did you go about it? I would love for you to give us a little bit more of the nitty gritty of, what it takes to actually.
well, mind you, this was all before the computer revolution with
Exactly.
easy access to everything. I would go to the different research libraries and sit there and read articles, scientific articles, medical articles. And then I would find the people who were experts in the field and interview them. And then
So you would actually find where they live and travel to their homes? And
oh yeah, in one case, I had to go to Europe, to Great Britain, to interview Dr. Burkitt of Burkitt's lymphoma, John Cleve, who was one.
How did you finance that? I mean, these travels.
By doing ghostwriting and editing. I wrote for the Writers Literary Agency and the great Sarah Dona, who was the female version of Maxwell Perkins. Perkins over Scribner's was the editor who literally made the careers of Tom Wolfe and Ernest Hemingway, F. Scott Fitzgerald, and others.
Mhm.
He would take manuscripts that nobody knew what they were and how to work with them, and he would just boil them down until they were perfect. He was just quite simply the greatest editor I know of in history. But the female counterpart to that was Sarah Dona. And she gave me a little tiny cubicle, little tiny desk, and she didn't pay me, and that was fine. She says, you got to learn, but you have some gifts and talent. And if you work 5 days a week here for 3 hours a night, then I'll work on your work and show you how to improve your own work. And I said, great, I love that. But also she was a great rebel. She was a radical feminist, communist. And then all these other very famous people who were all authors in the 1920s and teens and 30s and 40s. Now that it was the mid-60s, they've been forgotten. Young people wanted to take over the revolutions, cultural revolutions. They really weren't patient to go out and find the people who had been at previous revolutions. It's like today we think that woke culture is really asleep. It's just filled with its own ego and narcissism and entitlement. But we also had that in the 1960s. Life begins now. No, we've had a lot of life before this. And so those voices would sit there at night and grumble about no one calls them, they're not invited to speak anywhere. And as one of them said, look, we had our day. And she was talking, I'm like 22 years old. And I'm sitting there and I'm supposed to be editing and writing. But this woman who was, I think she was 84. That means she was born in the 1800s. That means she graduated from college very early. And she was an outstanding author. And she's saying, look, how much more can we do? Shouldn't we hand the baton off? I remember using those exact words. And they were not happy about the exclusivity of who was allowed to protest and be spokespersons for the movement. In any case, I would put my energy into interviewing these people and finding out, you've all done original work. John Yetkin was the first person to chair Department of Nutrition in Europe. And
sorry, what was that name again?
John Yetkin.
Yetkin. I don't know.
And Dr. Cleve and Dennis Burkett of Burkett's Lymphoma. It was Burkett who told me that in the decades that he worked in Eastern Africa, where there were over 67 communities that he was the doctor for, he had never seen a case of appendicitis, colorectal cancer, and other stress-related diseases, because if someone died of a heart attack, people from many places would come to examine this. It was so rare because these people really lived off the land. They walked, they herded, they primarily ate millet and gourds and grains. And so he said it was the roughage in the diet that was helping them stay healthy. And we now know that a high fiber diet and the lignans and other nutrients that we get from it can prevent cancer and, among other things, lower our cholesterol levels, lower our blood pressure. In any case, this was wonderful because I brought that back and I began to share it on my radio show in 1967.
You already had a radio show?
In 1967. I've been on the air nonstop for 56 years. 56 years on the radio.
So you started a radio show in your teens as well, in your teenage years or early 20s?
Yes. Yeah. And all I did was simply try to take complex issues and break them into simple language that people can understand. And then one day, a person watching the show, Peggy Siegel, called Joe Franklin, it was Joe Franklin's show in New York City, and said, can you put me in touch with that young man who was talking about issues? And she said, would you like to be on the Mike Douglas show? Mike's very much into health. I said, sure. And once I was on Mike Douglas, suddenly everything just opened up, doors opened up. So it allowed me to travel to more places, interviewing more people. I interviewed thousands upon thousands of people. In fact, right here, I have an archive of over 7,000 interviews. Film
Wow, 7,000 interviews. And how many books?
over 100 books, including
Over 100
multiple dozens of bestsellers, including the largest book ever written for women called For Women Only with Barbara Seaman, the great second generation feminist. And that was a big hit on PBS as well.
Yeah.
So anyhow, that led me to write the Complete Handbook of Nutrition. And that I was paid for 2 years of intense research. They said, well, do it faster. I said, if I do it faster, it won't be complete. If the title is going to be the Complete Handbook of Nutrition, it's got to be complete. Okay. So their pay was $250 a year.
What?
A year. I was given $250 a year. Yeah. And
Then where were you living? How were you living?
I was living in a tiny little 1-bedroom apartment with my daughter, and it was all we needed. In fact, at one point, my friends who were authors and successful authors, one of the top romance authors in America, Carl was one of my best friends, and they did an intervention. They felt I was living below the standards. And so they gave me their arguments. And I lived on West 89th Street between West End Avenue and Riverside Drive. They said, Gary, you know, you've had multiple bestsellers now. You're on television all the time. Every week you're on television. You're the nutritionist for ABC television network, Aunt Alice Fennell. She's got you on there every week. I said, but you see, that's not earning me any money. I said, it's my writing and taking someone's manuscript that is not legible and making it publishable. And I said, and I'm paid for that. But as long as I keep my overhead low, I can afford it. And they didn't understand that. So I then suggested a different approach. I said, okay. I said, look, you're 7 of you and you're all best-selling authors. What happens, however, when the editor who nurtures you, gives you a big paycheck, signs the contract, what happens when they retire or leave or are fired? You know that the next editor coming in and take their place has got their own stable and you're not going to be in it. What are you going to do then? I says, Carl, you have a beautiful duplex right on Riverside Drive, right around the corner. You see the Hudson River, you see the Jersey Shore, and it's large, probably about 2,000 square feet. I've got about around 280 square feet here I live in. But it's all I need. I said, no, I don't have a television, can't afford it. Don't have a radio, can't afford it. And sometimes it's so hot in the summertime that I have to walk across the street to Riverside Park and sit on the side of the hill just to keep cool enough so I can come back and get an hour of sleep. I said, you've got air conditioning. I can afford air conditioner. But every day I read my daughter classic literature and then explain it so she understands it. And I've been doing this for years and years.
So how does that happen? So now we're coming from a young man starting his radio show and working for a publisher to having a daughter.
Well, she fell out of a book somewhere.
She fell out of a box? What? I mean, I know that at the time you were also a great socialite and a wonderful dancer and, you know.
You know, I'm very happy the fact that I was graced with the privilege of having a wonderful daughter. And she herself is an author and outstanding chef. In any case, and we worked together for decades. But the issue was that every time I'd get a new best-selling book, I wouldn't spend the money. I would save it. I didn't need anything. And so, and even to my friends, I knew how to design fabric, cut fabric, make forms. So I would say, go down to the Salvation Army and find yourself an outstanding outfit, whether it was female friends in a dress, bring them back.
That's what we're seeing here.
I'll restyle it for you. So they'd buy a dress for $5, a pair of shoes for $3, a shirt for $2. and then I would redesign it for them. So all my friends, as poor as they were dressed to the nines. So if we had to go to a place to have a tux, they all had tux and formal gear. Casual, but really super casual. In fact, there was one store down the village that had 1930s and 40s clothes, kind of Cary Grant would dress. Mm-hmm. And so I designed a whole wardrobe for all my male and female friends that looked like they had just stepped out of a movie set from 1935.
All right, this is all really fun to talk about, but I'm so sorry that I have to interrupt. And let's get to the investigation of the industries around.
Okay, let me just give you one example in detail. I received a call one day from a man named Pat O'Grady Jr. He was the Newsweek bureau chief in Russia, in Moscow. And he was well-known, hard-hitting investigative journalist. And he said, Gary, I've got a story that I can't do, but you can. And my father is the source. My father wants to give you information about how things really go on in the cancer establishment. He's been the head of public relations at the American Cancer Society for 25 years.
Oh, wow.
So I met with him, and he handed me some documents. He gave me a story that took about 3 hours about how any alternative therapy was suppressed and the people promoting it were attacked. And then he told me about the therapies that make profit for different people in the cancer industry, but don't really help cancer, and how the statistics are skewed. And he showed me how they play with the statistics to make it look, well, take our chemotherapy and you will live 58% longer. But then he showed me the original material that one group lived, let's say, 2 months, and another group lived 3 months. By adding 1 month onto your life when you're going to go through the wretched conditions of having chemotherapy in your body, is it worth it? And yet it made it look like it was great success. It wasn't. So I researched it and I did an article. It was called The Politics of Cancer. And nobody, no liberal, I was liberal, no liberal person would publish it. People I knew. In fact, one of the people at Mother Jones, who was the managing editor, says, my uncle is one of the people that you're promoting. And I have to look at the fact that we will run out of advertisers. And so I said, okay. So then one day I get a call. And that article I'd also co-authored with Robert Houston, Gene Houston. You've heard of Gene Houston. They're brother and sister. They're both still alive. So anyhow, we got a call. And Ed Towns, who owned a little publication given exclusively on the Upper East Side called Our Town, published it. And it won the Audio Award for Best Investigative Journalism. Within about a month later, I get a call, and a person said, my close friend, Bob Guccione, who publishes Omni Magazine and all these other very important magazines, including Penthouse, you may or may not disagree with, he would like to talk with you. So I went down 67th Street, right off Fifth Avenue, and it was Judy Garland's old townhouse. In fact, her original piano was there and a big table, and here were about 12 people sitting around the table. And right beside Bob on one side was this big guy, Roy Grutman, outstanding lawyer, by the way, smart guy, very gruff appearance. You know, one of these guys that gets in your face like this. But Bob's very soft-spoken. So he went around the table and asked one question. Should we publish an article on the politics of cancer? Every single person said no. The advertising department says we'll lose at least $7 million in revenue.
Yeah.
The publicist says nobody will invite Gary on to talk about this because the cancer establishment has all the power in the world over the media.
And this is when, in which decade?
This is 1971.
Wow.
So anyhow,
yeah,
that's a half a century ago. Mm-hmm. So anyhow, I listened to all of them and I'm thinking, wow, no one wants to publish this. So finally everyone, and then Grutman said, we're going to get sued by everyone and their mother. So he stopped. There was no one else to ask. And he turned to me and very quietly, he said, "Do you really think or believe that we can save people's lives if we give them an understanding of the politics of cancer and alternative therapies that can really help them?" I said, "Yes, sir, I do." He said, "Okay, we're going to publish it." The whole room kind of exploded in anger because Bob had this idea that nobody should keep their thoughts inside. You got something to say? Say it. We can debate it. So then they debated it, and I walked outside, and as I'm walking down the steps, the editor-in-chief comes up and he puts his finger in my chest. He says, "You will not publish this article in my magazine." I said, "Sir, it's not your magazine, it's his magazine, and yet it's going to be published. But you and I will never see each other again." Now, this goes against everything that is done in publishing, everything, because you have to go in to the publishing company on a regular basis. That's who you communicate with, multiple people. Never again in the next 26 years of that relationship did I ever step foot in their offices. Instead, Bob and I would become very close friends. We would talk about the world that we're in and everything involved with it on a weekly basis when we'd have dinner together. And he and I would cook. He was a great cook. And then we'd go for a walk through Central Park with a security guy behind and in front in plain clothes, and nobody would know. And because they were really, he had done some articles on Spawn, California, owned by the mafia, or controlled by the mafia. And he was sued, and he could have lost any suit. He said, "What I'm going to do is this. I'm going to get a top lawyer. I'll try to get a Harvard Law Review person that we're going to hire, and they're going to vet every single word in your article. So if we are sued, we'll win." I was never once sued in 58 cover stories.
Wow, so let me repeat that. I have to repeat these highlights that need to be put out there. So you got the story published against everybody on the board in Penthouse, right?
With the proviso that if someone was offended by the nudes in the Penthouse, which I understood even my own mother would be offended, they wouldn't have to buy the magazine. They would give them a free reprint of just the article and send it at no cost to them. With one of those articles, there was a request for over 1 million free reprints. Yeah.
Wow. So this is just such encouragement for staying with your integrity, for staying with your truth, that it can be out there. And then you had a Harvard lawyer review.
I don't know if Trudy was Harvard Review, but she was Harvard lawyer, and she would go over every single statement. I had to have absolute third-person proof, and it was all proof. And I remember once the head of the AMA wrote me a letter, a very angry letter, and I said, "Sir, if you can show me where I've made an error, actual error in facts, I'll correct it and apologize." But he couldn't. In fact, my article led to the AMA being sued. And because one day my doorman called me and says, you got a package here. I went down, and there were these manila envelopes, large ones, and in them were documents, photocopied documents from the inside of the AMA headquarters and the secret Department of Investigations, which was secret for 25 years. It was run by a man named Doyle Taylor and Rockthorpe Morton. And in there were actual documents showing that the AMA had a systematic campaign to engage in restraint of trade in violation of the very important act where you're not allowed to interfere in the commerce of a group or individuals.
Let's just put out there
the
what
Sherman Antitrust Act.
What does AMA stand for?
American Medical Association. That was the top medical association then and is so today. And they get all their funding from the pharmaceutical industry. Anyhow, after I received about 5 anonymous, never to this day, I still don't know, it was given to 2 people, an outstanding reporter named Joe Lisa and myself. So I published an article in Penthouse, and it was a 2-part series because there was so much information showing how they went after chiropractic And
Yes.
they prevented medical schools from inviting chiropractors to take classes, the insurance companies not to cover it. So quite literally, chiropractic was on its deathbed. Had we not interceded, the whole entire profession would be over. Because if you can't get any insurance reimbursement and people have to pay cash, and let's say at that time people were making $15 for a session, you're not going to stay in business. And chiropractic was officially labeled as an unscientific cult by the AMA. Yes, in its guide of medical ethics. And therefore, you were not allowed to accept patients from chiropractors for any reason. And you couldn't refer patients to chiropractors for any reason. And you couldn't get into many of the science classes. So anyhow, after I did my report, I suddenly got calls from 2020 and 60 Minutes. And so 2020, Judy Smith over there, who was the executive producer, looked at all my file on Stanislav Brzezinski in Houston, Texas, with his antibody therapy, anti-neoplasms, was reversing cancer. And I did a story on him and showing that he was doing good work. He was with an MD, PhD, and he had received money from the cancer establishment, the David Runyon Fund, et cetera. But once he became a threat to the makers of chemotherapies, he was attacked. Well, we did the special, it won 2 Emmys. Then I got a call from...
So that's a documentary if it won Emmys?
Yeah, it was a special by 60 Minutes. 60 Minutes produced it and aired.
60 Minutes special. Yeah, wow. Mm-hmm.
And then 2020, they did it on Lawrence Burton, but I spent time multiple times in the Bahamas. And during that, Pat McGrady, Sr., got me an interview with the head of the head of the American Cancer Society's Unproven Methods of Cancer Management list. This is the dreaded blacklist. When you're on it, you can't get funding, you can't insurance, you frequently have your license taken away. So I sat down with him, and he was very pleasant, seemed like a nice guy. And I asked him, I said, sir, what gets a person on your blacklist? He said, well, you have to be a fraud, a quack. What are the principal points? Well, let's go through about 16 of them, he said. You have a secret. It's a secret. That's always a red flag for us. You're making an enormous amount of profit from it, far exceeding what a normal cancer therapy would cost. And you're not a legitimate medical doctor. You're not a legitimate PhD. Your information is never presented before august scientific bodies. You haven't published anything about it in the peer-reviewed literature. So he was going through that list. And I said, okay, well, I understand. And good for having a list that at least allows us who wouldn't know if something's legitimate or not to be on that list. Are there any current therapies sponsored by the American Cancer Society or the National Cancer Institute that are on your list? Oh, no. Those are all legitimate. Well, I happen to have investigated the chemotherapies. I investigated the death and mortality rates. And I would suggest you take a look at this because a lot of what they're suggesting is not helping people with cancer. But I said, here are 6 people. Could you go through why they're on your list? And what is the reference that you used? I mean, surely someone has gone and interviewed the patients, looked in their techniques. Have you ever visited any of these people that you've condemned? Pause. Mm-hmm. No. Have you ever spoken with them? No. Have you ever challenged them on any issue that would justify them being called a quack so they could defend themselves? No. So what evidence do you have? And in one folder, there was one of these European National Enquirer-like articles. It was purely libel. There was nothing in that article that was legitimate against Dr. Joseph Issel's. And I said, well, I have this article here from a peer-reviewed journal from a Professor Audier from Leiden University showing that Dr. Joseph Issel's has a 16.6% cure rate with terminal patients, meaning that patient, once they arrive at Issel's clinic in Germany, 5 years later, with no orthodox therapy at all, no chemotherapy, no radiation, They're alive and well with no cancer in their body. He's treated over 50,000 people and his files are open, and you pay whatever you can. He's a very humble man, he and his wife. And I've been there. I've interviewed the patients. I've interviewed multiple patients, including one patient who I wrote about, whose husband was a leading oncologist and whose two sons were oncologists. And her terminal cancer, they said, can't be treated, but the husband suggested they take a cruise. So as long as 3 weeks to 3 months, they would cruise together, spend their remaining days together. And she was going to do that until she heard about Issel's clinic. She went there, and lo and behold, 3 months later, she was alive and well with about 80% regression of her cancer. She was staying there because she was also helping other women who came in understand what the protocols were, et cetera. I said, so you know nothing about a man, though you condemn him. You haven't spoken to him, you haven't spoken with his patients, you haven't looked at the articles about him, but you look at a tabloid. I said, so this is the level of your science. Then he stopped talking. He said, well, I no longer have time. I said, sir, I wish you had the time to look honestly, openly, and objectively at the people you're attacking, because in my personal opinion, this is medical McCarthyism. And that was it. I wrote about it. I wrote a total of 58 articles. The whole series became Medical Genocide. And I exposed in October 1989 the first studies, the first articles written about how the United States government had hidden and lied about thousands of open-air tests or closed tests in hospitals where they were, for example, injecting cancer into pregnant women, the Sloan Kettering, how they were having children in hospitals fed toast with radiation on it to check to see how long it would take for the radiation to damage the kidneys, to what degree. Horrific test, even dwarfing the terrible Tuskegee experiment. And I published the article. And so I've exposed, I've done over 300 original investigative reports, more than any other investigative journalist in American history. And I've done documentaries. Death by Medicine is just one of about 20 just in the medical field alone. Drugging of Our Children, Autism Made in USA, The Silent Epidemic, Deadly Deception, and Gulf War Syndrome. I did 3 on Gulf War vets who were suffering from legitimate diseases caused by the vaccines, including anthrax and botulism, all denied by our government, Pentagon, White House, et cetera. So that's what I've been spending a lot of time on. I do other documentaries on the environment as well. In fact, the most winning documentary at film festivals, international film festivals, independent film festivals in the world 2 years ago, in 2020, was Last Call for Tomorrow, the most definitive environmental documentary ever done. And then this year it's Cost of Denial. Because back in the 1980s and 90s at the Tri-State Healing Center, I was seeing 1,200, among other patients, thousands of patients, but 1,200 were people with full-blown AIDS, sick as can be. Not one of them died. Got them all back their health. Not one was charged a penny. They got their therapies for free. The doctors agreed when we had a meeting to forego all charges, even for the vitamin C and vitamin A and D and everything else that we put in these drip solutions. And 18 of these people actually had their HIV reversed. Now, that's the first cases in the world to reverse HIV. So 18 went on an advanced protocol. They were coming in every day for 4 hours, 6 days a week for 16 months. The others are coming in once a week. So once we were able to get healthy, but these we actually reversed conditions. And we held a press conference, nobody came.
Yeah.
We held an all-day seminar, nobody came. No, 1,800 people came, including people we brought from around the world, but no in the media. I was at the Apollo Theater, standing room only, for 3 days in a row. Bill Tatum of the Amsterdam News, the largest African-American newspaper in America, had sponsored it. Black authors came, Black journalists came. Bill McCurry, multi-Emmy award-winning reporter of Channel 5. Tony Brown of Tony Brown's Journal, the most popular show on PBS at that time on 400 stations. he had me on over a 6-year period 8 times with cured patients telling their stories with their medical records. I mean, it took months and months of him going with his independent researchers and doctors, reviewing all my work to make sure that we had legitimacy. And we did. So we had a cure for, and who would stop that cure from being public? Anthony Fauci. He was promoting it.
So now we're coming to today, because I was just going to say, let's pull out now and let's look at what enabled that industry to continue. You were saying you were on this from 1971, publicly calling out what was going on.
Yes.
And here we are in 22, and it is still going on more than ever, or same as ever?
No, and far more than ever, because then it wasn't mandatory. He had everyone convinced, the gay community, that HIV was a death sentence. It is not.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
We have a lot of long-term people who are alive and well today.
Yeah.
And to take AZT, and we know that AZT is a massive DNA terminating element, and the amount of dose, 1,600 milligrams given each day, 400 milligrams, 4 times a day. Today, any doctor prescribing that would lose their license to practice medicine. And yet the natural therapies, for example, for pneumocystis for the lungs, Bactrim, he did not promote it. He did not advertise or want anyone to take it. And yet it would have saved at least 70,000 lives. But 300,000 people died from taking AZT, and AZT was shown to be a fraud. In fact, one day in my office, and I have an open door policy, so anyone who wants to come in can, and this very tall woman, she must have been about 6'2", and really thin, she comes in and she's got this, like this much white folders. And she sits on my desk. She's Gary. She says, "My name is Lynn Nesbitt. I am one of the researchers in the AZT clinical trials in the hospitals in northern upstate New York, University of Rochester, University of Syracuse. The entire experiment is a fraud. It's a fraud. They have people dying taking AZT, and they're eliminated. And they're pulling their tablets together because they were using milk sugar as the placebo. So if you opened a capsule and you put it out and you tasted it, if it was sweet, you didn't use it. Everybody wanted the AZT because they felt and believed it would help them." She said, "And I'm seeing the people get so sick." And so she said, someone's going to do the research to show that you cannot differentiate HIV from AZT toxicity.
Yeah.
And she was right. The several studies prove that. In any case, I did an article on that. I did a documentary on that. I did 5 documentaries on that, including AIDS, the Real Heroes, showing you the people I was working with, all HIV positive, but all of them got well. Then AIDS, a second opinion. Then AIDS Inc., which was one of the most powerful.
Yes.
And the pain, profit, and politics of AIDS. Just some of those that I did. And I got a lot of pushback from one tiny segment within the gay community called ACT UP. And they're the ones who said, "Gary Null's an AIDS denier." I said, "That's an interesting concept." I said, "I'm the only one to cure AIDS. I've treated 1,200 people with AIDS with free, and they're all alive and well. And I've written a textbook on AIDS, and you're saying that I deny it?" But they could get away with it because they threatened the media. They had the media on their side. You know, I won't say threatened. They used their political power so that anyone, including Celia Farber and others, good journalists who wrote about or spoke about the truth behind AIDS, would be erased and destroyed. Fortunately, I had a good reputation. I had a large readership, had a large radio audience. And so I just said, "Have your views. If you want to come on and debate me, I'll be happy to debate you." But they never did.
Nobody ever wanted to debate Dr. Gary Null. I know that because, and that's what's happening. I was going to say, there is a form of mass formation, mass psychosis that happens also in those communities. I mean, I had and still have many friends in the gay community, and some were just so entrenched in the belief system that they were going to die were it not for AZT, and the ones that died because they didn't get enough of it or fat. It was amazing, and some of us knew that that was not really the answer. Let's talk for a minute about the psychological aspects of the fact that we're once again running for it, or large parts of society are running for the new AZT, so to speak, because now we're all in danger of dying.
Well, we're not all in danger of dying. The mortality rate for people 65 and under is less than 1/2 of 1%, or better stated, 99.8% of young people will survive just fine. There's no reason for these people to be vaccinated. We have all bad science on their side. There is no legitimate science on their side. The fact that the FDA was requested by the vaccine makers to wait 76 years before they released all the data on their studies. But in spite of that, at least 50 Americans who are board-certified physicians or scientists come forward and shown us from their point of view, all pro-vaccine, that the science is wrong. Three things right at the top. I knew Kerry Mullis. He was a friend. I filmed him several times in California. In fact, the one film that I did in 1996, you'll see us walking on the beach across from his home. He was a very interesting human being. An hour and 54-minute interview. And that went viral all over the world. In fact, I was watching Jimmy Dore, and he's talking about it. And Kerry Mullis said that this whole thing about using his test, the PCR test, polymerase chain reaction test, to determine a diagnosis should never be done.
Yeah.
And
let me reiterate that too. So you actually walked with Kerry Mullis, who could talk to his inventions, but this was pre the 2020, I imagine, or was it post 2020?
No, I just said 1996.
96. Okay, sorry. Yeah.
And he won the Nobel Prize for discovering it in science. So you don't get someone more intimate in the knowledge of how the PCR should be done than the person who invented it.
Of course.
And he could not stand Fauci. In fact, he asked Fauci to debate him on this issue at the University of South Carolina. And Fauci refused. Fauci doesn't practice medicine. He's not seeing patients.
Yeah. So,
but that was one example.
Fauci, sorry to again interrupt, but who enables Fauci? So, because it doesn't seem to me like he is the one who turns the key. He's just executing.
Well, you have to understand that Fauci has been making mistakes nonstop. He wouldn't allow any other therapy to be considered except vaccines and AZT.
Yeah.
He's given hundreds of billions of dollars and has not yet to have a single successful vaccine against HIV. And yet here I'm curing it and proving it and going public and having all-day conferences with scientists around the world, and not a single call from anyone in the media, anyone. Because once again, if you open that door, I'm going to walk through it. And when I walk through that door, I'm going to be prepared. So just deny the door exists. And that's what they do. So they deny a press conference, because if they came to the press conference and were made aware with the actual patients who were there with their physicians with no HIV in their body, someone's got to have some explanation. Someone's going to have to say, what do you mean no HIV in the body? No, here are the blood tests. And you have all the blood work up, the patient sitting there. You have before and after photos and videos of the patient looking like a skeleton and now completely well. So they simply denied it, and they're doing the same today. They've controlled the narrative. Remember, the whole idea is you ask, who's behind Fauci? We don't know who's behind Fauci. We can only look at the money that he's given, unlimited amounts of money, hundreds of billions of dollars, and where he gives it. For example, remember when it was first revealed in the Lancet that, came from natural sources and all these different scientists signed up? Now they had to retract that article. New England Journal of Medicine had to retract the article. Remember the ones who said, ivermectin and hydroxychloroquine are dangerous? No, they're not at the right doses, not therapeutically and not prophylactically.
What do you know about remdesivir?
Well, remdesivir is one of the most toxic drugs ever given. There's a 25% mortality rate, and it is probably the only drug that most people who've ended up in the ICUs have been given. And if you want to be realistic, take a look at the death rates from people who took ivermectin, hydroxychloroquine, monoclonal antibodies, steroids, and other ways of killing bacteria, because it's not the virus that's attacking the lungs after about 6-7 days. It's done its dirty work. It is the bacteria. And so by having antiviral and antibacterial treatments, antibiotic treatments, you're able to save a lot of lives. Now, all of the doctors, and I've interviewed them all in depth, Dr. Malone, Dr. McCullough, Dr. Perry, all of these doctors have treated patients, cumulatively thousands. The most cited doctor in the world is a cardiologist, board certified, taught at some of the most respected schools, published over 1,000 articles in the literature, including the peer-reviewed PubMed. He is the most cited person in the world history in cardiology. He's pro-vaccine, and yet he's against this because they lied about.
Who is he?
Dr. McCullough.
Oh, Dr. McCullough. Okay, yeah. Mm-hmm.
Now, they lied about PCR being accurate. It is not. In fact, it is so inaccurate that December 31st, just a couple of weeks ago, the CDC took down any more of the testing that was required for PCR. They're bringing out other tests. It was inaccurate. And because normally, if you amplify something in PCR, you're going to get multiple extensions of its growth. Yeah. The most you should go is about 20 amplifications, maybe 22. Fauci even said anything above a 35 is just garbage. They've been doing it about 43.
Yeah.
So the vast majority of people, over 90%, are going to test false positive. Then they said that there's nothing to do to treat it. You have to wait until vaccines come. And as a result, they told people to go home, quarantine until your lips turn purple, then go into the emergency rooms. They could have used multiple therapies that would have saved at least 85% of all people from going to the hospital. But they didn't. I wrote an article 2 years ago at the very beginning about prophylactic preventative therapies. I listed everything only using PubMed articles, only peer review articles. And yet, just my audience knew about it, but no one else. Now, fortunately, some of these frontline doctors have used that material and expanded upon it at the clinical level. There's both a prophylactic protocol and a therapeutic protocol. You have to be guided by a physician, one who is open to this, to get the benefits. You can't self-medicate. So in any case, they were wrong about mortality rates. Everything they planned was done by a professor at a college, Imperial College in London, who said that we're going to have like 2.2 million deaths in the United States. No. Sweden would have 76,000 deaths. They've had 7,000. Okay. You must lock down. Sweden didn't lock down. Countries didn't lock down, but asked people to, be health conscious and not gather in large numbers. They've done fine. One of the lowest major countries in the world, as far as mortality rate, is Japan. In Japan, the largest city, of course, is Tokyo, which is really the largest city in the world, including its suburb, 40 million people. And yet they're flatlined when it comes to COVID and COVID deaths. Why? Because they're giving ivermectin. Even go down to Central and South America.
They also return 1 million vials because they detected metal in them?
We don't know how many they returned. I've not seen accurate figures on that. Yeah. Did they find in some vials contaminants? Yes, that we know. Now, you go down to El Salvador. relatively small country.
Yeah.
They have a kit that they gave you, a free kit. In it, it has an antibiotic. It has ivermectin, vitamin D, vitamin C.
Yeah.
You see, it has the very things you need in it, and their levels are plummeted. Since the top physician in Tokyo said it's okay to use ivermectin, that's when the plateau just collapsed. They have about somewhere in the neighborhood of 243 deaths per million. Compare that to about 2,600 deaths per million in the United States. So they're really got a hold of it. In the largest single population group in India, about 240 million people live. Quite simply, it's the most congested place on earth, that number of people in India. They have very high death and infection rate. They start giving everyone ivermectin, it flatlined down.
Yeah.
Just literally flatlined. Same as the largest state at the end, bottom of Mexico, ivermectin, Peru, Argentina. And a lot of people have been using ivermectin for the last 60 years in Africa for parasite infection. It costs about a penny per pill. So it's easy to take, and they've been taking it all along. And that's why you don't see the same amount of people infected with over 1.1 billion people in Africa. It's a highly populated country. Nigeria is the most populated. So you take a look around the world, and the epidemiologists started coming out and saying, your numbers are wrong. And they were. And also then the next thing, they were fabricating numbers. If, for example, you died of a heart attack, and you had tested positive in false PCR test, it was not a heart attack, it was COVID, in which case the hospital could get up to $100,000 per patient. But you wouldn't get that money if it was a heart attack or stroke. A motorcycle accident, the person died from COVID. So they inflated the figures, how much we do not know. That'll come out in time. But when they started doing autopsies, they found, contrary to their assertions, that the vaccine stays in the deltoid muscle. It did not, because the lymphatic system goes throughout the entire body. When they finally got around to doing the autopsies, they found the spike proteins in the ovaries, in the testes, in the heart, in the brain, all over the body. So now we have the highest number of young people dying of heart attacks or heart conditions in American history. Far more people, young people, would die from the vaccine than from COVID. And yet the people are making money, huge amounts of money. Those people are giving money to everyone that they can to keep on board. So their science is wrong. It's everything about this is wrong.
Yeah, so that gets us to a place where we can maybe get to, so we understand now that it's big business, it's big money making, getting rid of a few million or people on the globe doesn't matter to the big businesses. But what can we do to stop this process from continuing? Because if we don't, the next danger is going to be.
Let me ask you a question.
Yeah.
How many marches against COVID sanctions have you personally been involved in?
How many marches?
Marches, demonstrations have you been at? 3. Okay, where were they?
In New York City and in upstate, in Poughkeepsie.
How many people were there? Approximately, rough numbers.
Thousands, not tens of thousands.
Okay, the largest march to date was with all the top scientists, all the top doctors, over 30, in Washington, D.C. this past Sunday or Saturday.
I of course, I follow all these activities.
They had about 25,000 people. In a country of 333 million, to only get 25,000 people to show up for something that involves the sovereignty of your rights, your body, your choice. Yeah, that shows you that we're not going to win this based on the average citizen. The school teachers came out only because it impacted them personally.
Yeah.
Americans are very selfish at this point.
Yeah.
And we're not going to change. You're not going to win this battle. You're going to lose this battle. All right. And if you live in New York, New Jersey, Vermont, Virginia, District of Columbia, California, Oregon, Washington State, Illinois, you're going to lose big time with a lot of pain. If you move to a red state, not because of its politics, but because policies allow people freedom of choice, then you're going to be making a stand. But most people won't do that. There's 7,000 people a day, I'm told. I haven't verified that. It may be 700 who are entering Florida. A lot of people are entering Texas.
Yeah.
Because those are the two places that are really standing strong against the draconian measures of Fauci and his totalitarian regime. But just understand this. We can't get a single person to do a single demonstration against the millions of children starving to death and dying in Yemen.
Yeah.
We can't get the American apparel industry to stop using exploitive slave labor of women in Bangladesh and India and other countries to make their dresses, suits, making about 14 to 28 cents an hour. We can't get food to 48 million hungry or what are called food insecure Americans. We can't find places for 2.5 million homeless children who come out of school each day innocent, but don't understand why they don't have a home, a bed, a shower, bathroom to go to. They're homeless. We didn't help in 2008, 21 million Americans who lost their home by forcing the president to do an executive order, put a moratorium on home foreclosures. We couldn't stop a 20-year war in Afghanistan. When we did decide to stop it, it was purely political. And as a result, several 100,000 people that supported America are now there being hunted. Why? Because we did it in such a disastrous way that the Taliban were given complete access when they took over the capital to all of the paychecks. And on the paycheck, it shows what the person did so they can target people. And they have been. They've been beheading people, killing people individually or en masse. We've done everything wrong and nothing right for a long time. And we, the American people, must be held accountable. You all elected Barack Obama, Bill Clinton, Donald Trump, and Joe Biden. I didn't. If you had done just a little bit of homework and looked at their past, look at their affiliations, but why do that when you can watch television or be distracted? So don't be self-righteous with me at any point, because I will not tolerate it from people who have not showed that they've committed themselves to change. Did you change yourself? We have a nation of obese children. How'd that happen? A nation of obese adults. How'd that happen? A nation is riddled with cancer, diabetes, heart disease, arthritis, dementia, and Alzheimer's. How'd that happen? Because we're making good choices? No. And once a person shows me they're incapable of making a choice from a positive mindset, then I know that's not a person who's going to be engaged in positive change. They may be angry, but don't be self-righteous in your anger. Don't go to outrage and then bring it back to rage, because rage is where you make mistakes.
Yeah.
Outrage is where you see the truth of something. Then you have to ask, okay, I see something I don't like. Am I willing to make any sacrifices? Am I willing to go through any discomfort to change anything in my own life? My suits, I make myself, all right? I don't use slave labor. I eat organic food. I don't use sugar because it's so coming from either the Dominican Republic, slave labor there. They're using Haitians as slave labor, or the Canary Islands or other places. Where did your cacao come from? Your raw chocolate. Was it slave, or was it from free cooperatives? Simple issues. Are you using things like they use cobalt because it makes your life more convenient? But how about the slave labor in the Congo, where kids are working themselves to death for just pennies a day so you can have your cell phone? We are nothing but a nation of hypocrites. Now, not everyone. There are people who are conscientious, but they're a gross minority, as you saw when only 25,000 people showed up at what would have been our biggest spectacle. Yet when Robert F. Kennedy Jr. went to Berlin last year, 1 million people plus showed up. hundreds of thousands, 500,000 in London on multiple occasions, peaceful
Yeah.
demonstrations, yet the media has not covered it. Do you still read the New York Times? Do you still read any of their reports? Do you listen to CNN or watch MSNBC or Fox? Because outside of Tucker Carlson on some issues, everything is just, it has been politicized. It's ideology. So there's nothing out there in the media I trust. Our government does not work on our behalf, but its own. People have sought absolute power, and absolute power corrupts.
Absolutely.
You know, the English lord who said that. Yes, no. In any case.
No, I did not know that an English lord would say absolute power corrupts absolutely.
Lord Alton, yes. We have a nation that is gluttonizing itself, that is taking on the role of being primal and reptilian sufferers. We have a lot of Stockholm syndrome suffering, where we believe that let the government do something for me. And yet we have another group that says, I'll do it for myself. I'll do it better, more ethical, more honest. So we're a nation divided.
That's what I want to get to, Gary. I'm meeting so many people who are founding new ways of doing school, new ways of doing finances, new ways of doing villages, new ways of doing community, new ways of making clothes, new ways of creating food, etc. That's really the message that I think you also have always promoted.
There's about 5%. Now, 5% of the people making positive, proactive choices in a constructive way of unity, forgiveness, of working collectively together to say, no, it requires an empowered minority. You will never see an empowered majority make positive changes because they've gotten comfortable. Comfort addiction is our worst addiction.
Yeah.
And you've got to go through withdrawal. You got to turn off the television, turn off the laptop, stop buying crap. You got to stop and think, where does this come from? This genetically engineered food. Where does this genetically engineered cotton come from? Why should I be buying it? My credit cards, are they in the major banks? Shouldn't I be withdrawing and putting them in credit unions?
Yeah. So
there's a lot that we could do, but the average American's not going to do. So the idea is stop trying to reach the average American, because then you're reaching normal. You're going to only be well when, as my mother said, you reach for exceptional. Because it's the exceptional person that doesn't have to be, I don't want to give up. I don't want to. Look, I just spent 2 weeks, just ended this week, with a reunion of marathon runners. Those who had run marathons with me 30, 40 years ago. We all came together here, and I put them up, and I was their host.
Yeah, Sharon told me. Oh, that must have been wonderful.
Yeah. But understand, most of those people had gone off the wagon.
Yeah.
They could talk about change. None of them not a single person represented change. Not a single one.
Really?
Especially Sharon. Yep. And I would never do that again, because I saw how inherently selfish most of those people were. And as my mother said, if you have to be asked to do something that is self-evident, you're talking to the wrong person. But it's important to see this firsthand. You see what someone's actually doing or not doing. And then and only then can you see the truth of who's going to be a part of change and who's going to maladapt to the status quo. Those are the ones who end up being victims of their own hubris. Those are just my thoughts.
But I'm seeing that all the people you have spoken about that have collaborated with you on your incredible mission in this world, they too are maybe not covering all territories.
They're not covering anything. Please don't apologize for people's character defects. I see this all the time in the New Age movement. Mm-hmm. And to me, be honest. Show me what you've done. I'll judge you as you should judge me by what I've actually done, not what I think and not what I say, not what I write, not what I speak, I can show you some of the leading voices of the 1970s, 80s, 90s, who were really popular on PBS or on the internet. I never saw them at any of these marches. I never saw them sacrificing anything. The merit of a person's character is on poem. What are they willing to lose in order to stand up for a right cause? Just remember this. I was in Las Vegas to film Poverty Inc. about what we were doing or not doing correctly concerning how people have been forgotten and abandoned. I walked down the street, a normal street, and you see all these foreclosure signs or for sale signs. I spoke with a lot of people. And I said, how long you known your neighbor? Oh, Joe across the street, years and years and years. Okay. Went to school together. Our kids, yeah. Our kids went to school together. We vacationed together. Very good friends. You know, whenever we'd have a barbecue, we'd invite them or they'd invite us. Okay. Good friendships, yes. What happened the day when the vans pulled up? The two marshals were outside the door and said, you have 60 minutes to get all your stuff out of there. Otherwise, it's going to be padlocked and you cannot go back in. Well, yeah, that was tough. That was tough. So you watch all this through the blinds. You were looking at your friends, you claim, for all those decades, and you're watching them be made homeless. Did you go over and say, friend, can I help? Do you need a place to stay tonight? Do you need some food? Do you need a place to store some stuff? I can clean out our garage. No, you did nothing. And how many people did nothing? All of them did nothing. 21 million Americans were now couch surfing. What did our government do? Nothing. What did corporate America do? Nothing. What did our neighbors do? Nothing. So you see, I look at life without any photoshopping of the emotions or any other pretended value onto something. As a journalist, as an ethicist, as a person who cares deeply and abidingly about truth, I will not disguise the ugly aspect of human nature. In fact, the most important documentary I ever did was called Overcoming the Dark Side. And it only talked about what you can do in the positive light if you first have cleansed out the abscess of the negative, of conditioned and preconditioned epigenetic traits, conditions, addictions, insecurities, and guilt, shame that limit us. Because I don't care how good you are, you will never go further than your weakest point. I just read this morning where Antonio Brown, outstanding football player, but he quit about 2 weeks ago. He was on the, in fact, he wouldn't have got on the Tampa Bay Buccaneers football team unless he had a sponsor, and the person that came forward was the quarterback, Tom Brady. And that's how he got on there, because he had a history of bad behavior. In any case, he took off his top part of his outfit, his helmet, his shirt, everything, just bare-chested, and just walked out of the stadium. And then tried to make excuses. Well, you know, I felt it would be injurious to return, and they didn't care. None of that was supported by the coach or anyone else. He didn't seek help for an ankle or anything else. But then I just read where he celebrated this past night when the Buccaneers were eliminated from the playoffs. I believe that had he played, they would have won. It was tied game. Tom Brady did what he does as a magician. He was down, way down, and he brought the team back to be equal. And then with seconds left, the other team kicked a field goal and won, and threw Brady out of 2 more games, which we got into the Super Bowl. But he was bragging about that, as if somehow me not being there, you know, meant that they needed me. To me, my opinion, an extraordinarily immature person, selfish. That's my opinion. Now, how many more of those we have? We have a lot. Thank goodness we also have people who are not egotists, in my opinion, but care about cooperation, really play for the team, not just themselves. He'll be remembered by all of us who are actual real athletes, he'll be remembered for a person who should have given his all and his discipline, his focus to his team, and he didn't. And now he's mocking them because they lost. Now, I hope Tom Brady doesn't retire, because when he loses a game like that, he's going to take responsibility for it, even though he brought his team back to tie it with seconds to go. Almost an impossible feat, but he did it. That's what makes him so unique. I hope he realizes the fact you lose a game doesn't mean you lose a career. And Antonio Brown, he represents a very ugly part of American athleticism. And I can mention other athletes in other sports who are no better. But thank goodness the majority of athletes are conscientious, good people. They work hard, they're talented, they strive, and they don't look to grandstand. But we have people now looking at life as a blood sport in every career. And it's about making money, getting power, having fame, being a celebrity, and staying in control of your life. That is an approach that is very appealing for a lot of young people. And that is unfortunate, because those people frequently go to work on Wall Street or end up in the think tanks down in Washington. And then they're just part of a large juggernaut of lacking in idealism, lacking in spiritual values, but overwhelmingly top heavy in arrogance, self-entitlement, and I'll do anything to get ahead. Just tell me what it is. Because we wouldn't have all these wars. We wouldn't be pounding the tables to arm Ukraine, send troops, unless there was a profit motive. These are the most amoral or immoral people imaginable, and they control everything except you, except me, except the probably 30 million Americans who refuse to abide by their concept of being a good citizen. And Thoreau said it best: you can't be both a good citizen and a good person, because the rules for today being a good citizen is obedience and comply. The rules for being a good person is, I want the sovereignty over my body and my mind. I will decide what is right or wrong for me, not you, not a corporation, not the government, not a bureaucrat, a technocrat. So you see, just look at the world for what it is, and you'll be far more likely to succeed. Then I don't believe in this utopia. I haven't seen it in my lifetime. I've seen bright, wonderful, loving, caring, nurturing human beings who've learned to live cooperatively with their neighbors, no matter what their differences in ethnicity or culture, education, or income class status. But unfortunately, they're not the majority. And right now, the majority have the upper hand on everything. So thank goodness some parents are screaming, not with my kid, and some Orthodox scientists. The first in my lifetime. I've never in my lifetime found Orthodox doctors and Orthodox scientists willing to take on their peers. Orthodox fighting Orthodox, like watching 1,000 scorpions in a cocktail glass fight. Because during my entire career, the alternative never once stood up for itself. I know I was there helping them. Even when I would say, you've got to go public, you've got to take your story. No. You know, they'll do even worse to me. They've already taken away your medical license. They've already sentenced you to jail. Fight back. Well, my lawyer says not to. And it's just, I'm writing a commentary tonight on what allows a person to make choices that only a coward would make. Because if you took away everything that you own, you've taken away nothing that's essential to who you are as a human being. So if they can't take away your spirit, then why should you fear anything? Final thoughts.
Gary, thank you so much. And that's a great word at the end, though, that live your authentic truth to the end, and at the same time allow others to live theirs. Share to, even if it's a small congregation, I was going to say a small group of people globally, that we will still be a lot recreating, reinventing, renewing humanity and the way we work with each other and the way we work with nature. And I think every wake-up call like this one that you just gave us will help us all to stand in our truth and to be strong, to be courageous, and to lose that fear of, oh, somebody will talk bad about me and all of that. Just lose that.
Look, I don't care what other people think of me for a simple reason.
But so many, as you were saying, so many people.
Hold on. If I don't respect a person, what their thoughts are irrelevant to me. If I respect you, your thoughts are very relevant to me. So we stop personalizing because they have 1,000 ways they can attack you. Don't get caught up in questioning your own values because they don't accept the same values. Look, you said small groups start, no, small in the United States, huge around the world, huge. We're just not there yet. Why? Because we have so much. We have so much to be grateful for. And we take it for granted.
Yes.
If you want to see why you should be grateful, let me take you to some of the countries around the world and meet some of the people who do not have 1,000 what you have, but still find a reason to smile in the morning, still find a reason to believe in today is important, still willing to share whatever they have with others.
Yeah.
We have to start looking outside of ourselves. We've done this 50-day or 50-year journey looking inside. And most people are afraid to ask the questions that would open doors they didn't even know existed. Are you bound by fear, guilt, shame, and insecurity? If you are, everything that threats, that's going to be a stressor, and then you're going to distract yourself with how you deal with your stress. We've got to stop stressing, get calm, and focus upon what do we need to achieve. Right now, it's sharing information that exposes the other people as being wrong.
Yeah.
Not defending how we are right. And that's the way you fight this battle.
Yeah.
Read The Art of War, Lao Tzu. All right?
Yeah, The Art of War.
Then you understand the strategies we haven't yet used, but we should. Thank you. I appreciate the opportunity to share my thoughts, energy with your audience. And
everybody, please follow Gary Null's radio show. Sorry.
I'm on every day at noon, Monday to Friday. Then on Tuesday, noon to 1, and then 7 to 8 at the Progressive Commentary Hour. That's a very popular program, very serious. But you can download the program. You can go to GaryNull.com. I have over 800 articles there you can read by categories. So I've taken on the council culture. I've taken on identity politics. I've taken on D'Angelo and her whole racist screed. I equate D'Angelo's book, in my opinion, the second worst book ever written. The first was Mein Kampf in 1925. Rudolf Hess actually wrote it, inspired by Hitler. He was a functional illiterate. But D'Angelo's book on white fragility and how it's being taught and pushed in schools, it's a racist propaganda campaign. And good people, intelligent people who should know better are captured in the hysteria of the moment. You mentioned the earlier part of the program about mass hypnosis. The person who came up with that theory, I interviewed on Progressive Commentary Hour just a day ago. So yes, we have a lot to learn. You can download all the programs. I have about 50,000 hours of programming. You can watch the videos. You can look at the call to actions and see if any of that resonates with you. The key is this: if anything I say does not make sense or is not reasonable, discard it. Don't use it. But if something I've shared in documentaries and lectures, any of this, if it makes sense, share it. That's what we have to learn to do. And we haven't not been doing that, and we should. After all, Joe Rogan's got 11 million daily followers. That dwarfs anyone on MSNBC that has 800,000 or CNN. And it's about 600% higher than Rachel Maddow. So you see, he's not a politician. He's not a scientist, not a medical doctor. He's not a broadcast orator. He's not a motivational speaker. He's just having people on where he can have long, unedited dialogue or debate. We need more of that. We need a lot more dialogue and debate. Thank you all. Have a nice day.
Thank you so much, Dr. Gary Null.